you're a little more familiar with us maybe, or have had some time to think, we're wondering, what are some trends or best practices that you support in education that you think would be a benefit to our school or that we could incorporate here?
Okay. Yeah. And I was sharing, I did have some time to do some research because I got stuck in Phoenix Airport for 3 days on spring break. I'm not quite sure where to start in regards to, because I did my research. But best practices, we're looking at instruction. And if we, but sometimes best practices are literally hindered by contracts. They can be. I didn't necessarily see best practices hindered by contract, but I see hindrances in your contract to operations. When I looked, in fact, interesting enough, there was, did you see the article where the Detroit Free Press did a summary, 5-year summary? You plug it in and get your district 5-year summary of MEP scores. And I sent mine home yesterday to our board. As I began researching and looking at yours, it would be interesting to dig deeper, which you can't do just from outside.
Sure.
But as all of us, there's areas for growth, and some of them, if you look back 5 years, you see a trend up and then down, and then maybe way up, and then maybe way down, and some of them it was flat. Best practices in education, in my mind, have to revolve at the primary levels around reading. 70% of a math book are words, if you think about it that way. If you can read, doesn't mean math isn't important. If you can read and comprehend, fluency and comprehension are huge. And I think I had asked quietly last time, or quickly, and asked Kurt, does Mike Blissey, which is a grant-funded program, exist here? And you didn't think so, wasn't sure. Can you get me?
Different districts have.
Mike Blissey, does that ring a bell? Okay. It is a fluency comprehension-based program. We credit that in our district to our 3rd graders, 100% of them being proficient in MEP this year. 100%. And we really truly do credit it to that, plus a 90-minute reading block. Now, not just read for 90 minutes, but ELA, 90 minutes of instructional time in the primary learning zone, somewhere between when you get there and lunch, preferably even without the break of recess. And there's things like Lucy Calkins. It's a reading and writing program. There's 6+1 trade writing programs. These are just they are research based, and that's the thing that sometimes I don't know that we think about as much as. I don't want to beat up on any aspect of education, but it's very easy to become comfortable with what you do, and I won't say complacent, but comfortable with what you do because you know it works, because you've done it for years. But things keep changing, and I truly believe that the way kids learn changes with social and cultural changes in our world. We have to think of technology. When in the past, when we would access prior knowledge, we're talking about what we taught them last week. That's not what we're talking about now. If we're going to access prior knowledge, it's what that kid comes into the classroom with from a technology point of view. I mean, I commented last time I don't communicate to the board with email, but it doesn't mean I don't use it. But sorry. But I won't use it with Dale. But kids come with their brains are wired differently today. They just are. And so best practices have to be considered from the perspective of where we are today. This is almost 11, 12 school year. And we have to think of it that way. So I really would, and I specifically made a note. I would begin immediately with your 2 K4 buildings, and I would consider the 5A building with applying for the Mike Blissey grant. It's an enormous amount of work. It really is. But they have what's called progress monitoring. There are regular testing and assessment and evaluation, and you can see it charted. Here's the goal, and here's the chart. I mean, my kids went through it, and my younger one is a far better reader than my older daughter, just because the kids are not cookie cutters, regardless of what Lansing thinks. And so best practices in that regard, yeah, I would do that. You have to invest some in technology, but it is not the cure. At the end of this month, we have 12 whiteboards and smartboards being installed in our district. And I can't afford that. Gift from the MSD. So good people. That interaction and that level of awareness that kids will respond to makes a difference. You have to use them effectively. It's not just a $4,000 chalkboard though.
Right.
So, and so then training comes with that. I noticed in your contract that teachers are allowed, I think it was, I don't remember how it read any longer. I have it in my notes. 1 or 2 conferences a year, or maybe 2 conference days a year, professional development conferences. What I didn't see was, how is the conference that they apply to go to related to their professional development plan? Because under 1249 and 1250, you're going to be evaluated based on performance. If you're going to be evaluated based on performance, you better have a goal. If you have a goal, it means you have to have a plan and a strategy. If you're going to spend district money going to a conference, I need to know how it's going to affect learning and instruction in your classroom.
Great. Any follow-up to that, anybody? Okay.
I'm
Thank you.
next.
Okay.
You seem a little more relaxed this time.
Thanks.
I don't see things shaking and juice happening.
Less caffeine.
All right, let's get into this. What school community partnerships have you started or been involved with in your current district?
I guess sitting on, I guess I think of it as 2 ways. Bringing community into the school, and let me just digress briefly. When I took the role as superintendent, one of the weirdest things to get used to was not being in the building, because I had for 10 years been a building administrator. And so when I would, in the middle of the day, drive down to, and I sit on, and I missed the meeting Thursday, it's called the County Collaborative Commission. Every county has to have a collaborative commission, and I sit on our county collaborative commission. When I would leave to go to these meetings, it felt like I was abandoning ship. What if something happens while I'm gone? Well, I finally got it through my head that I just work in that building, it's not mine. So there's 2 aspects of community relationships. One of them is bringing the community to the school. And you do that through, and I would imagine you do it, because I see art and stuff everywhere, but some of the things that have been instituted, and I can say, while I was there, but I didn't do these. Again, this is when sometimes leadership affords people the opportunity to take a risk. And I think sometimes in education, we don't take risks because we can't afford to fail. You can't afford to make a mistake. I think you can. I realize the higher the food chain you are, higher up you are, the bigger the risk, the bigger the failure. But if leadership says, let's try that, and if the response is, well, it doesn't work, well, then we won't do it again. But some things we've done is we now have the spring, they call it the arts retrospective. They have all the senior artwork, and in fact, they take stuff that they've done from the time they were elementary school art that is kept in their folders, and all the way through senior art, and it's displayed on big 4x8 boards, and then the senior band plays, and it's an art show, and it's wonderful. That's a neat thing that draws people in. On the other hand, me going out, I sit on a number of boards, and I do that because, one, I also sit, how I got myself in this one, I sit on the County Planning Commission. Our county, 5 miles west of our school, has the largest gold strike in North American history right now. It's the craziest thing. Aquila Resources, look it up. They were actually looking for nickel, and they found gold, and it's a huge ore body, but it's very, very controversial right now because the process is not going to be like in Ishpeming, where you're going through and you're open pitting, which they wouldn't want anyway, and pelletizing. It's going to be a sulfuric process, and it runs right next to the Menominee River. So that's a big deal, but I got myself on the planning commission because if that's gonna happen, and Marinette Marine, where they make ships for the military, just received a $10 billion contract. And 1,000 people, jobs are going to be created, and 400 jobs are going to be created over here. And as the superintendent, if you can get yourself into these various committees to say, okay, if the concentric circle story, same thing. We went to a meeting the other evening in regards to urban development, and in 15-mile radius circles, they can project how many people are going to move to your community. 33 families are moving to Stevenson based on that formula. Well, that means that's going to change my school. It's going to change my population. I guarantee they'll all have 6th graders because it's the biggest. Family of 4 moved in last week. I have 34 6th graders in the class, twin 6th grade daughters. But so that's how you involve yourself in the community. It depends on the level. If it's me involving myself, then I have to be, at times, out of here and out there, and then do things to bring them in. That's a long answer.
No, it's fine.
Good.
Perfectly fine. Thank you.
Okay, I'm up next there. Can you give us an example of an explosive situation that's happened in your district and how you diffused it?
I'll give you one, and you tell me if it's what you're looking for. Last fall, everything comes with history, doesn't it? Try to explain a story, but you have to understand the history. Our district owns fiber in the ground from the south end of the district to the north end of the district. It was put in there via a grant just before I took over. A company came to us and said, could we lease some of your dark fiber? Because that's the company that buried it. And they horribly underbid it because they had to debore most of it because it was all rock, and they didn't go out and really look. They figured it was sand. So we made some arrangements. I said, well, I can't really lease it, but I could trade something for it. Well, so I get 10 megs of internet for nothing. And I now run my phone system through them for nothing. And I've saved tens of thousands of dollars doing this. But when the internet goes down or something gets goofy on their end, I lose my phones. Okay, that being said, this past spring, Marinette had a horrible situation where a young man took students hostage and then killed himself. Marinette it would be Stevenson, Menominee, Marinette. Marinette is just across into Wisconsin. So that puts us on alert. Be aware. Do our students know this? Those type of things. We don't know. 2 days later, I was standing by the library. It was 8:09 because I remember looking. The bell was just about to ring, and a teacher walks out of the bathroom and says, "You need to come here." And written on the wall was, "Bomb in locker today." So immediately we go into a lockdown mode and we call the police. And as soon as I dialed the number, the phones went dead. So I have no phones. Now we do have landlines because we have fax lines, and of course we have cell phones and so forth. But we went into a lockdown mode, trying to decide what was going to be the best process. And in the middle of all this, a 17-year-old boy has a heart attack. So that was, and I guess is it explosive? It is certainly challenging. And the best thing to do is to simply keep your head.
Excellent.
Did you get any
We didn't have
pushback
phones
from
for-
the phone?
We didn't have phones for 3 days.
Oh, wow.
It was, yeah, we got some pushback from that. It is what it is. I don't know. The parents were thrilled beyond words on how we dealt with their student. It was, in fact, the mom was in my office last week, and the diagnosis is terrible. But it was, and we've not been able to narrow down who did the bomb threat. Menominee had one 2 days later. So,
Domino effect.
yeah.
Thank you.
Ira,
Hi.
have you ever had a prominent community member or board member come to you and ask for special treatment? If so, how do you handle situations like that?
yes, I'm just thinking of, the first one that pops into my head actually wasn't when I was the superintendent, I was the principal, and the particular favor, we were closing a building, moving sixth graders into, this is when I decided it was time for me to become a superintendent, and my wife had suggested a year before, and I kept thinking, I don't think I'm ready, and I called friends, and they said, you'll just know when you're ready. And the superintendent called me in and says, we're closing Daggett, and the sixth graders are gonna come to this building. I said, that's fine, I've been thinking about this, here's what I'm doing. He goes, no, they're gonna go in this wing here. I said, that's the science wing. He said, yeah, I know, but it has a gate that can kind of coordinate them off, has its own bathrooms, they don't have to mix with the rest of the kids, we can figure out the lunch. And he said, but it's got a specifically designed biology and chemistry lab. What are you gonna do with those? Well, they'll have to be rebuilt on the other end of the district. So I went back to him a couple days later and I said, I don't agree with your decision, I respect your decision, but you really gotta explain it to me better. And he goes, sometimes when you're the superintendent, you just gotta do what the board says, and this is direction from the board. It wasn't. I found out because I called a friend that I went to church with, and I said, Steve, I'm not going behind anybody's back, you're not a board member right now, you're my friend. Do you understand what you're doing? And he said, I don't understand what you're talking about. So I said, I think I've been lied to. If that's the case, I'm not gonna work here anymore. And come to find out, it came from, coincidentally, Pence, the board president, whose son was gonna be a sixth grader. Poor decision on his behalf. That's not what happened. He ended up leaving, we didn't do that. That was the first thing that popped into my head. But I guess specifically, I know there have been times when I have had parents come to me because I was the assistant principal with their younger kid and the principal with their middle kid, and now I'm the superintendent, and they know me for 5 years, 8 years, 9 years, and they want to talk to me first. And I tell them, I will listen to anything you say, I can talk to you, but I'm going to send you down the hall. You have to start at the other end. Then you can come back, I promise.
So you advise using the chain of command?
Absolutely. Definitely, because it undercuts everything for one thing. Number two, if it's a situation that's going to end up at my desk anyway, I lose objectivity. I was reading your contract and I noticed that in certain circumstances, a committee is formed, and I could go back and look and find it, a committee is formed and it says that a board member may participate in the committee, and if it's not resolved, the committee goes to the board. I would recommend to the board, if that is what happened, that that board member then wouldn't be able to vote because they lose their objectivity, and now you don't have an odd number. So it has to start there and come back.
Thank you.
In your current district, what data systems and procedures are used to track and increase student achievement? How do you support and monitor your administrators in this area?
I'm going to go back to that Grant Maglisi. That is now K-8. It started K-3. In fact, our little school in Mellon was rated one of the top 10 in the state based on that. We've now closed that building, unfortunately, and it's become K-5, and then it's now K-8. And that system is designed to have what we call progress monitoring. On a regular basis, this program has designed in it, one of the middle school, they call it Ames Web testing, and at the elementary level, they call it DIBELS testing, and DIBELS Next. DIBELS is fluency, and DIBELS Next is comprehension. And it's done on regular intervals. And then it's put into its database, and then it's progress monitored. Every single kid, not just third grade, every single kid is progress monitored. K-5, 6-8, it is a little different, but not a great deal because you break off into so many different classes, but it's the same theory. So that's one aspect that we do internally. Externally is you have data for student success, and you have I know I should look for help, but I'm trying to think of the new one. Data for student success and data director. Okay, data director are systems that crunch your MEP scores, and that information is used when you look at your school improvement process to find gaps. If it's a gap in achievement, it's likely a gap in your curriculum, or your instruction, or your delivery, or something. And you use that information very detailed to find what you gotta pull up. When I looked at your MEP scores, it isn't just that there's areas that aren't making the state requirement. It's the fact that on this site over here, we have in some areas larger percentages of levels 3 and even level 4. Sometimes what we do is we focus on this end, hoping that they'll catch up. What you want to do is with this data director, you can actually go in and find which 12 kids are level 4. What particular concept did they not get? And they literally might have missed being proficient by 5 questions. And so you target, I made a note in here, you target the kids in level 3 and level 4 and pull those into level 2. It's not a magnet effect. And I think that's the best analogy I've come up with. I think we try to teach like we're a magnet. If I continue to hold the higher road magnetically, it's like my dad said, it's not osmosis, don't sleep with your book, you gotta open it. It's the same with the magnet effect. You actually have to get down here and you have to work individually with those students. Now, in regards to the administration, there's something that we're gonna do this year. And that is, once you build your school improvement plan, you want to come up with some type of quarterly assessment to evaluate the goals for 2 reasons. 1, you want to know that it's being addressed. And 2, by the time you've done that, so if you start September, let's say you do it in November and February. By the time you get to March, you have 2 good solid pieces of data when you begin the school improvement process again. Because a lot of the school improvement process is the gathering of data and going back and saying, well, what have we done? Not only do you want to know what you've done, but it'd be nice to know what you're doing while you're doing it. And we're going to try and develop that this year in our district. And that ties back to the administrator, whose evaluation has to fall under 1249 and 1250, who's evaluating teachers based on school improvement and their professional development plans and their goals. And it just kind of does one of these. That work?
Do I look familiar?
Telling you, I should have stopped on the way up and said hi. Told you she looked like my aunt.
Describe what approximate timelines and procedures you use to complete your budget process, and where does the board fit into your process?
I'll tell you what I do, but I just threw it out the window last week because it ain't working. Boy, that sounds bad. It's not working. Typically, beginning in January and February, we start having conversations with buildings and grounds. On my end, more directly, head of maintenance and so forth, head of transportation, that says, where are we at? Begin looking, give me your needs. What is it you have to have? As you're looking through school improvement, so much of this comes back to that. It's incredible. As you're looking at school improvement and you're doing a data analysis, if you find that, which we did a number of years ago, that, well, we found out because the phone was ringing off the hook with kids failing 6th grade math. Yeah, I know, it's because we changed textbooks to meet the curriculum need. But as you're doing school improvement, you're going to realize that we need to beef up our curriculum. So maybe we have some textbook needs over here. And we begin looking at all the various components early to say, what are our needs? Now, bear in mind, 83% of your budget involves people. I mean, that's like trying to balance the state budget on the police not driving as far every day, which they do that to them sometimes. It doesn't balance the budget. So you start gathering information. And then I try to run through, do work based off committees.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We try to run through various committees, and everything ends up funneling to finance. And sometimes there have been some, I think they were lighthearted comments, but you're not always sure that, well, if I'd have known finance was going to run the board, I would have been on finance. It's kind of, people don't like to hear it sometimes, but where goes your high school goes your district. And it's like we talked about last year. This is where you want to be. When you graduate a kid, that affects what you're going to do here. And so it's the same in regards to your budget. So we start putting things together, we start running it through committees, and we realize that we're not going to buy a bus again this year. okay? So we're going to tweak our maintenance budget, because I can add 10 or 15,000 over there, but I don't have 90 to buy a bus. And so forth, but I have to replace some floors. I had just yesterday, before I left, Paul comes down and said, I know there isn't any money, but we're talking, it's become a safety issue. I actually have floor tile popping in 5 classrooms. They gotta be done. Okay. But let's exchange that for the hallway at the elementary we were going to do. Fair enough. But we have to move the playground equipment from Mellon, because I closed that building, and it was a community-written grant a number of years ago, and you can't leave a $15,000 piece of playground equipment there, even though it's gonna cost me $12,000 to move it. You can't leave it there. So, gotta work that in. And then eventually it goes to finance. And if you're in a deficit situation, I'm gonna bring there, typically, my recommendations, because even though I know that the board makes the decisions, I'm gonna know this intimately, and come and say, I really think we need to put out an RFP, or we're gonna have to, in negotiations, or in your case, look at language, because we're gonna make cuts. If 83% of our budget is people, we have to realize it's gonna get to that, and we're there. And the hard part is, of course, is that you're proposing a budget based on numbers that you may not know. Now, the governor says you're going to know by the end of May. Great, gives me 30 days to solve my problem. But it doesn't mean that he can't change his mind in January at the revenue census and take it away. That's just what we live with. So it kind of works both ways. I mean, I bring the information and filter it through a committee and to the board to make decisions, which provides me marching orders for staffing, cuts, RFPs, negotiation language. But I would suggest this, and we were talking prior to the meeting, I'm not a number cruncher. I can say, hey, here's some scenarios that we want to take a look at. What is it going to cost if I could buy out 5 teachers? You know, what's it going to cost me over time? How's it going to affect my fund balance and my borrowing, which cost me interest? But on the other hand, if I could save $25,000 for every teacher that I buy out, how is that going to pay off, short term and long term? So we look at those kind of things, and said I can tell you the larger picture on how we need to do it, but I got somebody who's just loves calculating.
Question for you. RFP, what is that?
I'm sorry. An RFP is a request for proposal. I put out a bid for custodial services. I put out a bid for food services.
Okay. Thank you.
Bloody acronym.
Can you give us an example of reductions you have had to make and how you dealt with that impact?
Yeah. Reductions financially, reductions staff personnel wise. Yeah. We have language that is much more amicable than yours. And the language in regards to class size talks about the administration will attempt to do what is best, but we are not at the point where we can do what is best anymore. And some of the reductions that we've had to make we have consolidated jobs, and people have just had to do more. We've gone from 5 secretaries to 3, I mentioned last time, since August. And we all pick up stuff. And I did not replace the administrator that left a year and a half ago. And we all have to pick up stuff. And that happens. And it also happens in the classroom. And we have larger classrooms than we like in many aspects. And I wasn't kidding about 6th grade. See, that's a cut that we made. Last year as 5th graders, there were 3 sections. This year there's 2. And blowback, I got it. And my response was, I don't like it either. My kid's in that class. That's the reason I could do it. There's 35 kids in each class. Yeah. We have had to, incorporate the school newspaper into English 11. We don't have journalism. We've had to, in our CAD classes, and Mr. Whiteness is a wonderful teacher and a gentleman. I wouldn't know that, but he runs 3 classes at the same time. He does board work, and then his entire room is lined with computers, and he does SolidWorks and the other one. At the same time, he runs 3 classes. Our business teacher. Obviously, Info 1, you're doing Info 1, you may have 2 or 3 kids over here doing an independent study, maybe on their own, they're seniors, but Info 1 is Info 1. Info 2 is probably Info 2, but Info 3 and 4 can be mixed one. You become very creative. I was an industrial ed teacher, and Mr. Whitens is our industrial arts teacher. Last year we had a full-time woods teacher. This year we don't. And so he's taking his architecture class and has restructured the class to become not just to be less detailed in planning and going into the shop, and they're building 3/4 inch scale models. And so kids who couldn't get both classes now get both experiences to an extent. So you just have to become real creative.
Could I ask a follow-up question to that? Do you have any examples of reductions, other than classroom, maybe some controversial things or things more on the operations side that you've implemented in the last while?
Closed the building and closed our alternative school last summer. Our district had Mellon Elementary in Wallace and Daggett Elementary in Daggett, and then the middle school, or the upper L and high school, middle school were in town, and an alternative school was also in town. And last year we closed Mellon. That's really hard on the community. That's very difficult. Daggett was closed 5 years ago this summer, just before I took over. And so that's just structural downsizing. But we saved $10,000 by not, just on transfers. Every kid, we would bring every bus to the elementary and park 2 buses here. And those kids would get off and get on that, and then they would drive down, and then drivers would come back and park the bus at the garage, and then they would drive it back down and pick the kids up. They saved $10,000 just on those 2 buses alone. But I also save on custodial cost. I save on a cook, I save on a secretary, and I save $1,000 on utilities a month. Plus, it needed a new boiler, and it needed roof work. It needed more work than what I could afford. Are we really, really crammed tight into Stevenson Elementary? Yes. Are the Mellon teachers who had their own community for 30 years as happy? No. They're not. They're really not. The alternative school. We closed the alternative school. The concern was, and it was smaller at that point. There was 9 students, but it just about funded itself, but not quite. We had some at-risk money that we were able to throw into it. The concern was, are we to the point where we're not going to be serving these 9 students as well as we should be? Yes. What can we do differently? And so one of them went to global schools. Do you have anybody doing global schools in this area? Global schools are you familiar? It's a project-based at-home computer program, and you have to it's not computer program. There's an interactive part with a real teacher on the other end, but you have to log in every single day, 365 days a year. The district doesn't get an FTE for the student, but for this particular kid, that was best and it worked for him. Some of the other kids we have put on shortened schedules. We've done some different things to try to accommodate some of their needs, and some of them blended right back in real well. That was hard. That's a restructuring and a closing. We've cut bus routes, and we're going to cut another one.
How do you deal with that kind of situation?
I have one right now, actually, that we've pretty much come up with a solution to the grievance and how to get what I need and not get another one. I don't know your culture here or your internal workings of your community, but when a grievance comes my direction, and it's not as a point of brag, but I really believe we could count on my hand how many we've had in 3 or 4 years. It's just because it's going really, really well. And it's that relationship that makes it work. And that relationship carries over into the classroom, whether people want to think it does or doesn't, it does. So grievances, of course, you're going to follow your policy, and it's going to start with the most immediate responses to where was the grievance caused. If it's a violation of the contract, let's say it was with the principal, and if it's not resolved, you're just gonna follow the steps, and that's what it's there for. So my process is, it's gonna be this is the process, it just is what it is. But sometimes, and rarely, I think, do you draw a line in the sand that says, we talked about that last time too, lines in the sands are really, really difficult, because the winds of change can literally change your line in the sand. The board last year said in some of our cuts, we're going to use PA 112, Public Act 112, which allows for privatization of non-instructional services. And it's certain things in that, let me think here, how do I explain it? The use of volunteers. It's things that you also are not involved in negotiations. Well, we're going to use volunteer coaches in some of the lower areas as a way of saving some money. And so we did that, and we talked about it in negotiations, and they didn't agree to it or understand it, but we put some wording in there that said, well, we had two different interpretations on what that wording meant by the time. They were like, these particular sections or coaching positions won't be filled for the 10-11 school year. Right. Doesn't mean I'm not going to have them. I don't know what they're in poor communication or what, but I don't know if they actually thought we're not going to have 7th grade basketball. No, that's not it. Or if I was set up, I'm not sure which. But when we posted them asking for volunteers, the grievance that came was, well, no, if you're going to post it, you got to fill it. If you're going to have it, you got to post it. No, I don't think I do. I really, truly don't. So there was a grievance. All right. Well, we settled the grievance by coming to an understanding that that the union would not object to club sports, because we have club sports. Club sports are self-funded. So to get around the grievance, or to settle the grievance, we are going to have golf this year, and I'll pay Gerald to do it, but next year it becomes a club sport. It's a vernacular game.
Thanks.
My turn. This one they assigned to me, and I don't know why. What kinds of communication tools do you use to ensure all stakeholders are aware of the budget, especially in tough times?
There has to be some sense of people's own responsibility. And we have committee meetings that are public, and they're posted for that reason. Sometimes you can only do so much. I have several email lists that the executive committee, I have quarterly, let me back up from your question. Quarterly, I meet with our executive committee, by the way. I forgot that. We call them quarterly conferences. So right when school starts, and then 4 quarters, I meet with the executive union committee. I don't do it with the support staff. I don't know why, we just don't. I do it with them, and the idea there is specifically designed, it's actually in the contract language, that we will meet to discuss issues before they become grievances. But they have to be contractually related. If it's, Julie was late to the staff meeting, and she runs it. That's not my problem. I can talk to your principal about it. I'm trying to think of something. If it's a building issue, you go to your principal. But that has presented itself as a way of hearing about something before somebody has stewed on it. Quarterly conferences. Okay. No idea what you asked me.
Let's start again.
Communications, I can do that. In these email blocks that I have, I will regularly send out to all staff, and off it goes, an attachment that comes from MASA or MASB or the School Equity Caucus, information that I get, so that they're seeing the same numbers that I am. And when it comes to finance meeting, my secretary doesn't have to, but she sends an agenda to the 2 union presidents, so they can see what we've got. If they don't disseminate it, or if people don't read their email, I don't know how to help that. I put articles in the paper. That say, in fact, I got a little bit of blowback, to use one of your words, from our previous representative to Lansing. You put my contact information in there. Yep, you're welcome. Because, you know, look, if you don't want these cuts to be made, people, make some phone calls. Because if all she hears from me, well, that's just that superintendent who's not happy with his budget. Well, she needs to hear from a mom and a dad or a grandma. So I put stuff in the paper on a regular basis, and we have gone, I noticed that your district passed a head lead. I don't remember when I saw that, 2 years ago, a year and a half, 2 years ago, a couple years ago? I can't, and I don't know why.
Oh, wow.
We have tried 3 times in 5 years, and I can't. Just last spring,
Last May, I think. wasn't it?
The extension of it.
the extension.
That was
Yeah.
extension.
That is excellent, because in 2013, in my district, when we renewed Proposal A, if it still exists, because it really doesn't exist now, when we do that, on the ballot, it's going to say 16.5 and 2.5. And they're gonna have to vote for both, one, either, or neither. If you're my community and you can't pass the Headley, how many people are gonna vote for, hey, I have a choice, yeah, I'll do 2.5. Well, then, we're broke. And it would be legitimate, it would be a legitimate vote. Well, anyway, so to try and pass that, I put out in the paper, here's our situation, just very simple, blunt, transparent. And this is what the board is considering, because this year I lost $145,000 to Headley. I've lost $500,000 in 5 years. And we're gonna make these cuts, and we did. And a year and a half later, we tried again. And you try to say it in the sense that, you know, the board came to the community and we heard from the community that you wanted us to make these cuts, so we have. But because of school and sometimes I'll do a series. Here's how school funding works for the layperson, because it's confusing for the educated person. And put that out there, and then end it with, here's where we're at. And if it doesn't go, then we're gonna do this, and you have to. So communication to the community sometimes is in the paper. We're reworking our website and hoping to have a superintendent's corner and a principal's corner. When I fit in writing in it, but we can do that.
So you'd be willing to put articles in the paper once a month, I would say?
Yeah, that'd be fun. Yeah, that'd be great.
Because I think that's what we used to have, our one superintendent used to do that at one time.
Yeah, every week there's a different school.
Yes, used to have.
Our school system, because we've worked out a thing to where everybody feeds little information back to this particular teacher who was just doing a little elementary newsletter, and he now, through the elementary principal, who left, by the way, she did go, she got a big pay raise, she left. That goes out, it goes out weekly.
Oh.
And then my stuff goes out more infrequent. But it's not hard to put something out there monthly because, especially in today's world.
It's enough to report.
Yeah. In fact, I didn't have time yesterday, but our mute scores are going in the paper next week, the 5-year trends. Yeah. So you gotta put good stuff out too.
Right.
Yeah. I'm up next.
Okay.
This is kind of a spin-off of the other question I asked, but what is one of the most difficult issues you've had to face in your district, and how did you resolve it?
It's the budget. I mean, it just is. That's facing the, because when you say facing the district, because that's a very large encompassing picture. So it's the budget. And we've talked about how we address those, and how we're going to address it right now is I'm going to go to negotiations and I'm going to ask for a 13% pay cut from everybody. That's what we came up with last week. Some of the things that I have faced in the district that have been very difficult are what you're facing today. I helped to host a memorial service for a 16-year-old girl 2 years ago, and a 15-year-old boy 2 years before that. I have let people go, and I find that very difficult. But I've done more than anybody else has done in our district, and I don't know why that is. Whether it's just because the unfortunate opportunity presented itself, or I did what someone else wouldn't. I find those very challenging because I like people. But we have to do the right thing. But as a whole, closing buildings, cutting programs, things like that.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to do.
It is.
we doing okay? We're getting along there. These questions are pretty deep.
It's all right, it's all right. This is the best time of day to ask questions.
All right, what do you believe is the role of technology to increase student performance, and how do you ensure it's being integrated, in your district?
Like I had commented earlier, that we have to think of, you know, when I was in school, Sparta had some of the one of the first computer labs in the area, and it was programmed. I mean, it was. Look back at it now, it's endless, it's antiquated, but it isn't necessarily any longer about teaching the kids how to use what you have, because they come here with it. My 9 and 12-year-old know far more than some of our staff. They really do. They truly do. I have a few staff members that don't check email. I have one that doesn't check his regular mailbox, but we used to stick his paycheck way on the bottom, and he'd come in my office, well, I got my paycheck. It's in your mailbox. I looked, dig, dig. That was fun. But technology has to be looked at as a tool that we use, not something we teach. And it's a philosophical shift. Yeah, we have to teach that. I mean, I do understand that concept, because you know, pen pack typing is just doesn't work, and you have to be careful that technology doesn't become how we write. You know, we had students doing the MME test, Michigan Merit exam, and the principal saying, as he was walking around looking, he said on a couple of occasions, you know, he saw the letter U for you and the number 4 for the word, and that's because those kids text. Okay. So we have to teach the how it's used, when it's used, but in regards to the fact that we don't have to teach to get comfortable with it, and I think that's the advantage. They come with it. That's our disadvantage, to be honest with you. It is. That's the teacher's disadvantage, is the level of comfortableness that the kids have. But use the advantage. You never learn something better than when you teach it. And if you're a teacher who gets a whiteboard who's just not 100% comfortable with it, learn it with the kids. They would think that was the coolest thing in the world. And they will listen and respect and grow with you faster than if you're trying to teach them. So technology has to be used. It is exceptionally important to go out in today's world. But again, it's not that we're teaching them how to use Microsoft Office specifically, because in 3 years it's going to change. I think what we have to begin to teach them is how to constantly adjust to what they face. And to do that, we have to allow them to be comfortable. Again, it's not necessarily teaching them how. They already know how. It's teaching them the ability to be adaptive, roll with the punches, and so on.
There's sort of a follow-up to that, Ron, and you may have hit some of that, where there be that henpecking or something. It says, what are some potential roadblocks to successful integration, I can't even say it, other than funding?
People. The people in the building. Yeah, and that's, I don't, you know, I don't know who I said it to. I said it to somebody. I don't have television. I don't have television in my house. I have a television, but I don't have an antenna. I don't have a dish. I don't have a cable. We took it down 2 years ago when we put an addition in, and I never put it back. I don't miss it. My kids, I don't think they miss it either, to tell you the truth. So when I say I don't have a cell phone, people think I'm nuts. Well, I don't even have television in my house, and it's not because I don't believe in technology. That's a whole other story. But there's a difference between the ability to use technology and all of the nuances of new technology just being noise. And I think we can use technology efficiently and directly and provide the opportunity without burying people in the change that constantly hits us. But the things that hinder us, if we set money aside, is probably professional development on the instruction. We talk so much, our professional development focuses around content and delivery and the analysis of the data, we don't always do a good job of doing technology or of doing professional development on technology. And it may be because we don't have it, because of cost. Now, we have, like I said, we have these whiteboards and smartboards being installed, so we're specifically planning to do some of that. But even though we have a computer lab in the library and 2 regular computer labs that teachers are welcome to sign up and use, and many of them do, I mean, I can tell you right now, just sitting here thinking about it, we haven't done a professional development activity on bringing your class down. That would be good.
There you go.
Food for thought.
Thank you very much.
You have identified an administrator who needs improvement. What process would you use to improve the competence of that person? And what corrective action would you take? Have you done this successfully in the past?
I don't know what you call successfully. Yeah. The 3 circumstances that I have, I've not discharged an administrator. They've all resigned. But it was going to be one or the other. The 3 circumstances I've been involved in did not afford themselves to the opportunity to say, this is a weak area. We're going to set some goals and work on that this year over the next 6 months to your next evaluation. And then at the end of that year say, we're making progress, but we're not there yet. So your 3 years is going to become a 2. I've actually not done that. As strange as it sounds, having gotten rid of 3 administrators, none of them involved the process of a long-term evaluation and setting of goals. It has for 2 teachers, but it has not for, and I would assume, the same process. And so administrators need goals just like I would want goals. What are my goals going to be for the year? And some of the goals are going to be developed based on what that person wants and thinks they need, and some of them are going to be based on my observation and feedback. And maybe it's going to be the fact that you got to be out of your office more. It could be that simple. You have to be out of your office more. You have to be, just before the bell rings, you got to hit the halls. Now that may be more for an assistant principal than a principal, but not entirely true, and not all the time. So you have to. I'm getting some feedback that you're not returning your phone calls as promptly as you should, and I know how busy life can be, but you need to do that, or whatever it is. Those type of conversations typically start off pretty simple, to be honest with you, just probably more of a generic, undocumented conversation, because I think everybody has the opportunity to say, I know I've been exceptionally busy, or I've been sick for a month, I don't know, something. But you're going to get to the point, if it doesn't get better, to where there's simply a process of documentation, and it becomes a progressive discipline, just like you do with a student. It's a progressive discipline with an administrator. If they've been here for 4 years or more, they have tenure in your district, and you have to then, and this is going to, I have Martha Marcer on speed dial at Troon, and and you're going to do it that way, because even though administrators don't get tenured as an administrator, they have tenure in your district as a teacher if they've been here for 4 years and they have a teaching degree. And so if you get to that point, then you've got to follow the Tenure Act as well, and so you want to be very careful. But I would imagine that at the end of the year, we haven't seen the progress we want, and when it comes to, and I don't know how it's done here, but if there's an ad hoc committee for administrative negotiations, or if it just comes from me to a committee and making recommendations for them, I would suggest that this person, we're going to let their contract step back a year. We're not going to move it forward and see what happens. Because the discharge for cause is the direction that I ended up going, and we never got there because they resigned. Is a very different process.
Do you want to take a drink?
No, I'm good.
You're good.
All right.
What are the necessary ingredients for successful remediation program?
A of a student or a staff person? Student? Okay.
They didn't specify, I'm just reading what they told me to read. They
All right.
made the questions.
All right, it's okay, I'll make up the rest.
With a student.
For the students?
Let's go with the student.
Let's go with the student.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right. Let's do a couple. Let's pick a kindergarten or a first grade. And I do that because my mindset says that we don't retain a student beyond first grade. And so now we're into remediation. You might move a kid to second grade that you really had some qualms about, and then the first week move him back, but that's about it. And I know that there was a bill proposed within the last couple of years that said unless a student, at third grade reaches a certain reading level, I don't know. Now that's a philosophical argument. Do you retain students? Do you not retain students? Do you social promotion? There's not a right answer, but we're talking remediation, and you can remediate it for K and 1 to help them along, but theoretically, we're looking at beyond second grade because I'm not going to retain a student beyond second grade. Okay. So, given that, if you have title services, and I hope I'm going down the right road with remediation, if you have title services in your K-4, are they K-4 buildings out there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which you likely do. There are hopefully title aides who are going to take students that are going to be struggling and work with them. Small group instruction is very, very effective. Response to intervention, RTI, we talked about that briefly the previous time. In conjunction with something like My Blissey, which provides for regular intervals of evaluations to see where they're going. And literally, again, it will tell you the student is struggling in science and social studies because of the fact that they don't comprehend well. And so that's what you got to focus on. To spend more time reading their social studies isn't going to do any good. If they can't comprehend it, you have to diagnose the problem. And once you diagnose the problem, you can remediate the issue. More is not necessarily the solution. A kid who's not doing well in math shouldn't have 48 math problems instead of 24. Maybe he should have 12. Because if he's to the point where he's struggling and he's frustrated and he doesn't want to do it because he's struggling, more is not necessarily the solution. If he's doing the first 12 wrong, the next 36 aren't going to be any better. So remediation is about diagnosing the reason we need it. Maybe the reason that you need it has nothing to do with his ability. Maybe it's behavior. Behavior at times, as many times as I've had parents in my office because their kid is on the way out the door and they're like, "But he's failing and you're kicking him out of school." I said, "He's failing because of his behavior. He's not stupid. He's a bright kid. His behavior, his choices are causing the fact that he's choosing not to do this." Okay? And then of course you can get into a great deal of things there. Maybe his homework is a mess. And maybe school's the best place. And maybe he's not going to breakfast and he should be because he's not getting one at home and he doesn't bring a lunch. Well then, very quietly in the office, he's direct certified through free and reduced lunch. He gets a card like everybody else and he doesn't look different any longer. And now he's not hungry. So remediation is first finding out what the problem is.
What about a middle school student?
That's kind of what I was thinking in regards to that lunch deal. They don't want to stand out. They don't want to look different.
What is your policy or philosophy on?
Retention-wise?
Yes.
Thanks, it was nice being here. There's not a good answer for that. It just isn't. 8th grade math should count as your high school math. In my opinion, with the new Michigan Merit curriculum, our district has Algebra A. Algebra 1 is Algebra A and B. And A is in 8th grade and B is in 9th grade. And if you don't make Algebra A as an 8th grader, you're dropped into full year algebra as a 9th grader because 10th grade is geometry. Okay. And so you have to, no, you don't retain middle schoolers. I'm sorry, I don't think you do. I don't. And the problem is if you don't, here's the problem by not doing that. If they claim middle school syndrome for 2.5 years, by the time they hit 9th grade, they're doing 9th grade work on half of 6th grade education. That's the problem. But I don't think hammering somebody over the head is the most stimulating, used that word, I used to have a sign on my office as a principal that said 3 R's of education, relationships, and relationships, and relationships. They have to, it involves parent involvement. You know, I wouldn't deny a parent the ability to hold their kid back, but they have to understand the fallout from that, because now your behavioral instances are gonna spike, likely. It's just not what it was 25 years ago.
What programs or strategies have you implemented to support gifted and talented students?
Limited because of I don't have AP classes, I wished I did. What we tried to have is an opportunity for Algebra A and Algebra B, or straight up Algebra. Algebra 2 over 2 years, or straight up Algebra 2, and an opportunity to maybe to go to Bay or NWTC. NWTC is in Wisconsin, in Marinette, which I can't do anymore because apparently you can't cross state lines, even though it's half the distance to the community college. That's in Michigan. Sometimes those opportunities are afforded themselves in extra things. And a good example would be our Business Professionals of America. Do you have BPA here?
We don't.
Right. Business Professionals of America, it's a vocationally certified, the teacher's vocationally certified. And just to pat her on the back, not me, because this is just, I just say, whatever you want, Sharon, you can have. This year, they'll go to nationals. Her parliamentary pro team has won the nationals first place 11 years in a row, and that's not competing against like-sized schools. That's competing against Clark County, Nevada. That's competing against Dallas, Texas. That's competing against Grand Rapids, Michigan. Little bitty Stevenson, 11 years national champions. Last year they were in Lima. That's where, and unfortunately, you know, yes, there are opportunities. You can do online classes that are college-bound, college prep that I can't offer, because I can't offer. We rotate classes once in a while. We'll take physics and we'll do it once we get where we know we can make it happen. This was a few years ago. We pulled physics off the books for a year because I couldn't run a class of 7. But I can run it every year, but I can run a class of 14. So for 1 year, I don't remember what we did. I might have paid that teacher to teach on this prep. That might have been the 1 year that when I worked that into our contract, one teacher, one time on their prep hour. So I did that, and then I put 11th graders in there, and I held it off for a year, and now it's every other year. We hope we're able to offer physics to a group of 14 instead of saying I can't afford it because it's too small. But in regards to getting kids prepared for college, the Michigan Merit curriculum itself is pretty rigorous, and we've had that conversation, maybe too rigorous for some. But online opportunities and dual enrollment.
What is your high school passing rate? I mean, your students that graduate, and do you know how many of your students actually attend college?
Our graduation rate is, how do you want me to calculate that? The way the state does, or the way I know it works? And I don't mean to beat up on the state so much, but
We all do.
We know that.
we get along well. I think last year we had a graduation rate of about 96% based on students that were there as freshmen, who should have graduated as seniors, who didn't leave because they got in a fight with mom and went to live with dad, and then got in a fight with stepmom and came back, and now they're a year behind. Based on what it, you know, in theory, what it would work, we're in the mid to upper 90s on a regular basis. And we are, because we have the ability to be very, very intimate. Now, that being said, our counselor came down last year and she said, I want you to see these before I put them in the mail. There is a dozen letters being certified. They went out yesterday to parents that said, your kid is this close, and we have had, you know, parent meetings, principal meetings, counselor meetings, all of these things, this close to not graduating, and now we're a matter of 5 weeks away. Michigan Merit curriculum, for those, whatever reason, and I'm not blaming that, but you also have to understand sometimes you have pockets of kids. This year's 6th grade, every teacher that has had them has said this is the best group I've ever had. My graduating class in high school was the best in a decade. My cousins ahead of me was the worst in 2. So it fluctuates. and I don't know why that is. And in regards to going off to college, I think our culture, our communities are probably similar. There are kids who walk out of our welding program. There's 3 of them last year that walked right into a job making more than my first year teachers. They don't want to go to college, even though we really encourage them, go and get certified. Well, coincidentally, in some of our Northwoods workings, they don't have to, be it as it may. Probably 70% of our kids at least enroll. I couldn't tell you how many stay.
Can you give us an example of a recent decision that you regret that riled up the community, and how would you handle it differently this time?
Yep. October 31st of 2009.
Oh, boy, you got right down to
Got
the
the
day.
I do. I had a conversation with our high school principal that said this isn't working. And he said, are you firing me? I said, you're not firing me, I'm asking you to go back to a classroom where you were 3 years ago. And it didn't work. And it was, would I do it differently? No, because we had 2 behind the door closed private conversations before they became public displays at board meetings. Hometown boy, 81 championship basketball team, had varsity basketball coach, parents, long time standing large farm in the community. I had a conversation with my wife the night before. I said, you know, we're gonna do this tomorrow. It's a Friday. We're having that conversation. I said, I just need you to understand what this might mean. And that's probably the most disruptive decision I have made. I inherited a very disruptive decision when I became the superintendent. The superintendent previous had implemented a hard cap for insurance that I then negotiated a final closure on after 18 months of stalemate negotiations, closed Daggett Elementary, and put the district on a 4-day week, school week. That would have started that fall and then left in August. And that's what I inherited, along with having spent $1.2 million out of the fund equity in 2 years. So there was a lot of rile, but I came in looking like, you know, the guy on the white horse. Okay. So I might look like the guy on the donkey now because I'm doing it. But at the time, he had more out of his welcome, so to speak, making some of those decisions. When this friend of mine said, you know, you'll just know when you're ready. I said, well, how do you know when you're ready? He goes, you'll just know. I went home one night and I told my wife, I said, I think I'm ready to be a superintendent. She goes, how do you know that? I said, because I know what's being done and I would do it differently and I know what I would do and that's not it. So I moved us back to a 5-day school week. We cut to 150 days. It was a cost savings measure. Republic, Michigan, if you're familiar with where Republic is, you would know like that, has been on a 4-day week for many, many years. It worked for them. It kept them alive. I don't know that it will any longer. But I put us back to a 5-day week after 2 years because we lost 27 students and we were going to lose 10 more, and I knew which ones they were, and I told the board it'll cost us $70,000 to add 15 days back and go to 5 days, or and stay at 5 days and it'll cost you $70,000 when you lose those 10 kids. You choose.
Mm-hmm.
So.
What was the downfall of the 4-day?
The teachers, there were several, from the community's aspect, I think their thing was, I don't want my kids in school that long. It really wasn't that much longer, to be honest with you. And the kids, so it was, their argument was flawed because our northern district to our north drove a bus to within a mile of the elementary we had closed, picked up kids and drove them back, and they were on a bus for an hour and a half to go to school, a half hour less. So their argument was a little bit screwy. Internally, tell you the truth, internally for me, it was great. I didn't work a Sunday for 2 years because there was no interruptions on Friday. You get a lot of work done when there's no kids in the building, but it gets real boring after a while. Educationally, the delivery has to change greatly. I think if you go to, because you have to rework everything you've been doing for 175 days, your pacing guides change overnight. It's not the same as going to a block. A block schedule is obviously you've got to rewrite and think your curriculum differently there as well. It affords you an opportunity to have mastery of subject. I think in one of the issues that we face in Michigan with our curriculum is that we teach a mile wide and an inch deep, as opposed to teaching depth and mastery. If there's 90 different benchmarks in the English 9 curriculum, and you have 180 days to do it, think how that looks. Think how that works. Maybe there will be an advantage to the national core. I don't know, but they found it easier to have smaller snippets with more days, smaller snippets of delivery over time that you could incorporate together in the course of a week than trying to do 1.5 in a day. Yeah.
Back here again, can you give us an example of a situation you had to contact local or state government officials to address a concern in your district?
Besides the police.
Besides,
Well, clearly, I've been on a first-name basis with Judy Narrett and now Ed McBroom, and also Tom Casperson, for that matter, our representatives. And it's to convey, what life is like on the ground for when you go to Lansing and make decisions. It isn't. It maybe not necessarily be I have a problem that I need a solution to. My business manager is remarkable and has had to contact local officials because as she has reworked their numbers that have come to us, they've been wrong on occasion. And so we have had to go back to townships or the county and say, this is what this should be, would you please look at it again? That's not something that I certainly would have done or even caught. That's out of my purview. But I guess I would think of the representatives would probably be the most common. And I think it's important to have a relationship with them regularly. I've told them I'll come to Lansing and talk, testify if you like.
thank you.
Briefly describe how you would go about developing a comprehensive 5-year plan for the district and how you would implement it.
Last year, our district, we began the conversation saying we will, 2 years ago, actually already, having this conversation. Sometimes the planning is, part of the planning was structural, organizational. I don't mean structure within the organization, the physical structure, the plant structure. You have to have a plan. Our roof systems are replaced on a rotation. Our desks are replaced on a rotation. Our buses used to be replaced on a rotation. And we had those type of conversations. We've kind of thrown some of that right out the window. And it was the same thing in regards to, as we built the high school schedule, and we moved 6th grade up because we closed Mellon and Daggett, and we moved K-5 into one building. We have 6, 7, 8 middle school within the 9-12 high school. There had to be some long-term planning as to what we thought this would look like. What specials do we want to work in, and how do we want to, we slowly we bring 5th grade self-contained into 6th grade where they have 2 core teachers, math, science, English, social studies. They sit like this, they rotate. So that they have the same teacher for 4 subjects, but they go back and forth across the hall at the bell. So they get used to it. And it progresses into 7th and progresses into 8th. And until they hit 9th grade. But to tell you the truth, we've had to set that all aside because right now, our plan is on hold. The stuff that we want to do, we can't do. So it would be a challenge to sit here right now, and not that I haven't done my homework, but on a 5-year plan, some of that 5-year plan has to involve your contracts. It has to involve negotiation.